Hey guys, welcome to a cold and windy day here. I don't know how it is in y'all's neck of the woods, but ours is oop. Let's try that again. I guess I didn't hit the button on the podcast. So welcome to another cold and windy episode of Raw and Real with TJ and Jim.
Yeah. Sorry, YouTube, we're not starting over.
We're not starting over, so I thought I hit it about the same time, but I guess I missed it. So hope everyone has had a good week. I know it's been a
week.
For sure. So
it has not been an easy week around here for sure.
No, and I guess it's just the dang devil coming in and messing with us. I had mentioned, and I don't even know if I told you about it, but I had mentioned on our update post that we probably had a big announcement coming, and I didn't know I was going to get in that with you over breakfast, and I got sidetracked and I flat forgot. I don't know if you want to get into all that or not, or what you think about it, but
ready you are.
Well, after a lot of praying and seeking and stuff, we running. I think we've ran for a long time, so we have decided that we are going to start a Sunday night outreach program here in our hometown. So we're excited about that, and I think that's kind of what we were referencing too when, it talked about the enemy coming in and bringing in all kinds of chaos.
Yeah.
For sure. So we're excited. There's a couple of more places I think that we're praying on as far as doing some outreaches on a consistent basis. So we'll keep y'all updated on that as it comes down. But we are definitely for so long we've always been under other coverings as far as the 501c goes, and we're in the process now of finishing up our 501c3 and all that stuff. So we're excited. We're going to be a full-blown nonprofit ministry all in itself. So we're excited about that. We'll have more on the location and everything as we get things finalized and stuff like that. But it is going to happen at some place in this town. We are having outreach. I think we're shooting for the 8th of January. Yeah. That's what we're shooting for. Yeah. Doing a Sunday night. We don't want to interfere with anybody in their morning, worship or whatever. But
right.
I know when you and I were probably junior high level in our walk with God, one of our mentors, they did a Sunday night deal, and it went really well there in town, I noticed.
Yeah, because if you are hooked in somewhere, we don't want to be in competition with anybody.
No.
Because there's some great churches in this town. So we don't want to be in competition with anybody, but yet at the same time have that outreach for if you're needing additional, worship time, a different type of worship maybe, or just those people that don't have a place to fit in or call home, or, it's kind of the best of both worlds. And I always enjoyed Sunday night because Sunday mornings are hard in a lot of ways.
They can be, especially with your job when you had to work a lot.
Yeah.
Saturdays weren't days off for you like they are for some people.
Right.
So, yeah.
Nights, like Saturday nights, you get off and you're trying to get to church on Sunday morning. It's hard.
You've done it more than once when we were helping run a church.
Yeah.
So.
Slept many naps in the little pews.
But, and we look for this to be a lot more of a, that's why it's an outreach, and I think not more of a church. I hope to get deeper and dive a lot deeper into some stuff,
Some teachings.
Yes, definitely do some teachings, and we're just trying to operate in our calling. We are more teachers with a pastor's heart, I guess you would say. But anyway, that's kind of the direction we want to go, is to get deeper and dive off into this stuff.
Yeah.
along with everything else. But as far as announcements go, I think that's it.
Yeah. We've had several people reach out to see if we're going to do another men's meeting and another ladies' meeting.
Yeah.
And yes, this has kind of taken precedence over that. And I think ladies' meetings and men's meetings will grow from that outreach.
Yeah.
It would just be a break off of that instead of how we did them last time. I just feel like God made us kind of stop and revamp some things because we were running from our true calling here. This town is hard. There's a lot of churches in this town, so opening another church was not our passion, and it's still really not. We just want to have a place for everybody to feel welcome, I think. But as far as men's meetings and women's meetings, those are going to continue and probably start back up in January. It'll just be a little different format, I think, than what we did last time.
Yeah, it will be a different format, and
So.
You know, like you were saying, I mean, it is a difficult area. This is still a traditional Bible Belt kind of area, so to speak. It's nothing against anybody. It's just like the traditional denominations are deeply rooted here. And for some reason, it's harder for people, if you will, to fit exactly where they fit in. Right? You know what I mean? And it's different. And so we're not trying to take away or anything like that, like you were saying. We're just trying to add to it and expand.
Right.
And get outside of some parameters that I think are holding us down and holding us back from being, you know. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this raw and real, was to get outside of the traditional ways of doing things and to get away from what's allowed and what isn't, because I mean, I don't see how you can put parameters on God, but yet that seems to be exactly the case in what's gone on for many, many decades.
Well, nobody wants to talk about the controversial topics or the topics that people are truly dealing with, because it's easier to push things under a rug and deal with it later when the explosion happens and you have to deal with it, than it is to just be able to talk. And that was our marriage for 15 plus years. You know, you just don't talk about it. You just move on, go on, and then, I mean, that rug's going to get bumpy and lumpy and you can't walk on it anymore. And then when you open it, like, it's an explosion because you didn't feel like you could talk to somebody. And it's the same thing with the ministry. Like, there's so many things that we're not talking about because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or we don't want to step on anybody's toes, or, you know, what's wrong with just having an adult conversation about the things that are really going on? You don't have to be on the side. You don't have to be in the middle. Like, you can have your opinion, and I can respect that.
Well, I've shared this a little bit before, but you know, there was a time when my grandfather had a bit of a drinking problem, and of course my grandmother played, you know, piano at church, and so it's a state of mind, and it may have been a generational thing, but I still see it today. But there was a state of mind where it was like, we don't talk about it. We're not going to address it. We're not going to get out. We're going to do everything we can to kind of keep it concealed. And that's the problem, I think, that happens too much in church, is we don't want people to see our weaknesses. We don't want people to see our struggles, because it makes us look bad. When in fact, that goes against everything that the Word of God stands for, Old Testament and New. You know, iron sharpens iron. We're supposed to hold each other up. We're supposed to hold each other accountable. We're supposed to be there and pray for one another and not make a mockery out of them, but yet don't let them be a stumbling block for themselves or for others, but yet pick them up and help them get over and past and through those difficult times.
Right.
And that's what we wanted to do from the very beginning with this podcast and these videos, is to, you know, air our dirty laundry, so to speak, and hopefully through God's grace and mercy, it'll change people's lives. That they can see God in us and through us, and convert from the way things have always been more into the way that we need to be the best and to reach the fullness that God has in store for us.
There's a girl I've listened to her podcast several times, and that's her thing, is using my story for His glory. And I think that's so true, and I think that's something that we don't do very often. I was raised, you just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I know you're mad, but I don't know why you're mad.
Right.
You just didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about your feelings. You didn't talk about, and it's taken me a long time, I think, to get to where we are. And I'm not saying I'm great at it now.
No, it's still a struggle. It's still a fight to communicate properly, and
come a long ways, but I'm still not where I want to be as far as that goes. But when you're taught, from birth to suppress your feelings, and you don't really have an opinion, and I'm not saying I had a horrible childhood or they beat me or anything. That's just the way it was. You just didn't talk about your feelings or how things made you feel. You just dealt with it, So.
No, for sure. And I guess some of that is, we had a big, I guess, office meeting, you would say, the other day, and we sat down and kind of made a list of topics that we wanted to touch on the next 5 weeks, and kind of a set list, so to speak. Not that we're trying to be scripted by any means, but we like to hear from God and know what He's wanting to address and do what we feel in our heart. And that's why, when this one came up, we talked about this. I said, I want something that's a little more controversial, because we haven't really been all that controversial, in my opinion, here lately. So maybe to others we have, but not to myself. I mean, we want to get raw and we want to get real, and that's why we decided to talk about divorce as adults today, and that came up and something we wanted to touch base on.
Yeah.
Because it's not something it's odd to me, because, you have something that's in statistics is over 50%. It may be more than that now. I haven't really looked it up or whatever, but I know at one time, marriage rate was at 50% in this country. And that's crazy to me. It really is. It's crazy to me. And yet we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to deal with it. And still a lot of beliefs and a lot of theologies still look at it as a sin. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to touch base and put it up to God's word. Yeah. I've been married before. I have been divorced. I was in my early mid 20s, and it just was it wasn't a good marriage. It wasn't ordained of God. I don't believe in any shape, form, or fashion. And then, lo and behold, here you come again, and it's been a rough roller coaster of a marriage, but it's been a God-sent blessing marriage to me.
Yeah. I think there's a difference when you know what you're fighting for.
Yeah.
And what you're fighting against. And there comes a time, I think, in some marriages where they weren't supposed to be, maybe. And you can fight all day long, but at the end of the day, you're just fighting against each other. You're just making things worse. So I'm a big believer on trying to make it work, and if you just absolutely can't, then I get it. I do. Well, because maybe it wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. Maybe it was. I don't know.
Well, and that's one of the topics that we're going to deep dive into a little more. And another thing that we're going to really get into is it okay? Is divorce okay? Truthfully, because a lot of traditional beliefs still say that it's not, and they still are firm in that. I know that I've heard stories of some people that get kicked out of churches because they are divorced, or they're not welcome in a church because they have been divorced.
That goes back to that man-made religion to me. I mean, was there not a divorce lady in the Bible?
We're going to get into that. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean,
Paul addresses it actually in Romans chapter
I didn't
7.
study because I thought we were talking more about the effects of
We are.
like divorce on an adult child. Maybe.
We are. And
I didn't look anything up as far as that goes.
No, and this is just something that God had laid on my heart, really and truthfully, and it's kind of a law versus covenant, because the Old Testament is more about the law, and that was where things were established, and then the New Testament is about the covenant through Jesus, and so Paul actually addresses that in verse 2. He actually talks about this very thing in chapter 7, verse 2. He says, "For the woman which hath a husband is bound by the law to her husband, so as long as he liveth. But if the husband is dead, then she is loose from the law and her husband." So he's addressing the church at Rome. And I think he's using it more of as an example to talk about the difference between law and covenant. Because he gets on down in verse, well, we'll get to that in just a second, but in the law, like when you were married, like if we were married, we're supposed to be virgins and then we're married. And it's the law is full of, the structure is about being clean, and it's impossible to be unclean and be holy, and no spots, no blemishes, and you have to be sanctified and holy, and that's what the law was based around. That was the only way to be in the presence of God, was to be holy. Right. And so if you had been caught in adultery or anything like that, then you were unholy, you were unclean, right, and you could not be welcome. But verse 6, he approaches it from this angle. And it says, "But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead wherein we were held, that we should serve the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter." So he's saying, that we're no longer under that law. We're no longer under the law and how it operates. That through the shed blood of Jesus Christ, we now have a covenant. And actually, there's a Greek word for that, and it's KATERGETHEMEN is the Greek word for that. I'm not even going to try because I'm going to murder it.
You lost me at KAT.
Yeah, no. But the liter, and this is from the Interlinear Bible, which basically goes in where the King James, they've dictated it to the best of their ability. The Interlinear Bible is like verbatim. It's what was written down supposedly in the scribes, right, and scrolls, and all that. And literally what it means is that we've been released. In the original translation, it uses the word "we have been released" right there from the law, which that word literally in the Greek means inactive, abolished, or nullified. So it no longer exists. And so that's important to me, because there's so much difference between, what's okay and what isn't okay. Like, we know that God does not expect us to be in an abused relationship and to live that way. So by those terms, and in fact, some, like you say, some man-made genres of this have even, said, well, that's a legal term, that you're okay. Like, you can still come back to church if that was the case. You know what I mean? Or just some, like, they were an alcoholic and won't get past it, or if they're into drugs and they won't quit and it's causing harm, then those are, so you're right. I mean, there's too many man-made alterations, so to speak, to the effect. But the very word of God says that we're no longer under that decree of the law, that we can't be divorced. So being divorced is not a unholy sin, in other words. I think God wants us and expects us to give it our all, to work at it to the most that we can, and be the best we can for each other. Like, that's being in a godly relationship and caring more for the other one than you do yourself. we've talked about this many times on here, is being, good guidelines to follow to keep things on the right path. But like, what happens when it's not okay? Like, what happens when there is no out? What happens?
I've always had the approach, and whether it be right, wrong, indifferent, is what you do is between you and God, because nobody knows what's really going on within your four walls. Nobody. They can think they know, but they don't know. They can walk by and we could be yelling and cussing and screaming at each other, and it could be because of a football game. You know what I mean? Like, you
For
don't
sure.
really know what's going on. And like I said earlier, like, you can't come and talk to people because it's controversial.
Right.
You can't go be like, this is what's really going on, we need help, without being judged or without, oh, we don't talk about that. Y'all deal with that. We don't talk about it. So in our situation, that's the number one thing people ask me is, why didn't you leave?
Right.
I didn't feel like God gave me the okay to leave when we were going through our things.
Okay.
And I didn't want to leave. Like, I still had a true passion for you, and I still had a true devout love for you. And I knew you could be something way better.
Right.
And, like, let's not even talk about all the times, like, you could have left me. I mean, I'm not a perfect wife by any means. So, and I've always tried to explain that the best way I can, and I always get the dumb, blank stare, like, okay. But that's truly it. Like, I didn't have permission until I did. But I still didn't want to leave.
Right.
I knew that was the only way things were going to get resolved, maybe. I don't know. I don't think it's anybody else's call what you do. And I don't think if you sit in a pew on Sunday morning or Sunday night that those people get to tell you whether or not you can come or not.
And I've got so many things on that, and that's probably a whole nother podcast. Like,
True.
Nobody gets to tell me when and where I can't worship God. And if I don't, it's kind of the old cowboy saying, if your saddle don't fit, then I need to go find a different horse, kind of thing and scenario. And I'm huge on that in all sense, because serving God is a privilege.
Yeah.
It's not a right. Nobody has the right. It is a privilege to get to serve God, and I always look at it as that, because of everything that He's done for me. But I had to address that to get to you in order to get to the big phase of where we're going. And so I know you were like on guard, so to speak, on that, but I wanted to lay some foundation.
Yeah.
I wanted to have something to base this upon, because, talking about divorced is out. It's like I was in that situation. Here I was, I had been married and divorced, and then we got together, we started dating, we announced our engagement, and it was like shortly after that, Mom and Dad decided to split up. And I'm not getting into all the... It's not my story to tell, so I'm not going to tell it, because it's just...
Once again, we don't know.
I don't know everything. I wasn't there through all of it. I was grown, living on my own, and I know Dad came and talked to me about it, and we had a viable discussion about it, but inevitably, they decided that they just couldn't do it, and so they split up. And later, right after our wedding, everything became final. Shortly after that, and they divorced. And yeah, and it at the time, I didn't think of the ramifications, but now looking back and looking into a lot of my struggles, and I'm not blaming anybody, because it's my call, it's my choice. I made the decisions to do what I did, and it's on me. But looking at the ramifications of things, I mean, it kind of did affect me, and there's certain areas that still affect me for some reason or another or whatever. But it's been difficult to deal with. It's been difficult to navigate through. And I think it's important that you figure out how to navigate through that stuff to keep it from causing more problems down the road. Um, I know from my experience, it had a lot of different effects on my family, my intermediate family, you and you know our daughter at the time, and soon to be our two boys. Like it's made things difficult. Trying to add in another Christmas and Thanksgiving and this and that and the other. Like it has not been easy, and just the blended family and different things that we've had to endure, the different things that we've had to adapt to, has been different. It's not been your normal Hallmark card setting. You know what I mean? And like, I think it's important if you have that capability, that you know address the matter, the family, and like in all the different ways that it affects the family dynamic of things, and how things trickle down through the new, I guess you would say.
Well, I mean, there's a lot I won't share because, like you said, it's not our story to tell.
Right.
And one of them's not here to defend herself, and one of them shouldn't have to defend himself. You know what I mean?
No, they shouldn't.
He didn't ask for this. So there's a lot that I won't say. But what I will say, it's been hard. Especially in the beginning, because we were trying to start a new life.
Yeah.
We were trying to start a new marriage, and it was wild. It was a wild ride. A lot. We were trying to figure out each other. You were trying to figure out that your home was no longer your home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
No matter how far removed you are from your house or how old you are, like, that's something you'd always known. And now it wasn't there. So that was incredibly hard to navigate in itself. I mean,
that, and then on top of the fact you're trying to be excited because you're in love and you've got a new family and things seem hopeful, and then it's not so much that way in this support system, because they're going through their avenues and personal things and feelings and hurt feelings and being angry and upset and all the mixture there, and not to mention the fact that it's just, I mean, I guess, I know when we told our daughter about a lot of our story before, and we held it off as long as we could. I mean, 18 years for Pete's sakes, but I mean, it was like a shock when she found out that I was married before, and it was a shock to hear about my legal issues, and it was a shock. And I mean, you think, for some reason, it's that innocence that the Bible talks about, but you think your parents are going to be together forever.
Yeah.
Like, you see it happening in other families, you see it happening on TV and movies and shows, and you're like, but thank God my family's solid. And then you find out they're not so solid.
Right.
That there are, I mean, you just never think. You never think it could happen to me, and then it does. And then it's like, well, now what? I mean, now what?
Yeah, and on top of that, like, you want to be there for them. You want to be, like, supportive.
Right.
But you also feel like you're being torn two different ways because you're getting two different stories. And you, like, don't want to take sides.
Right.
But you don't want to act like you don't care. And it's a tug of war, I feel like. There is and was a lot of hurt. A lot of hurt.
Yeah, there was.
Probably unintentional, I think. I don't think anybody intentionally set out to hurt anybody, but there was a lot of hurt, a lot of questions that we'll probably never ever get the answers to, and that's something that you just have to be okay with. And like our family will never be the same as far as dynamics go.
Right.
I mean, it will never be the same. It'll never be right, even for our kids down the line. Like that dynamic is not the same.
Well, like I know. I mean, there was a time, and I don't mind bringing this up because it's not really that big a deal. But there was a time for whatever reason it got brought up by my dad's parents that they were asking about mom and that they missed her, and there was something said that was like, "Well, come see us," and mom said along the lines of, "Well, I didn't know," and like my dad's parents were like, "Well, you're always welcome here. Like you were our daughter forever." You know what I mean? And so there was always that uncertainty that played in, and it does, like, it makes everything uncomfortable. It makes everything uneasy because I don't feel like anybody really knows where they stand.
Right.
Nobody knows. We're treading on thin ice, so to speak, and you don't know if it's gonna just crack or if you're gonna fall through.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and
the other families always ask about each other.
yeah,
and you're just like,
you don't know what to say.
And I'm not a confrontational person, so I'm
Right.
like, I don't know. I mean, they're good. I don't know. I hated that because like they truly cared about the person they were asking about.
For sure.
You don't know how to answer that. You don't want to tell them they're living their best life, but you don't want to tell them they're sitting in the corner crying either.
It's one of those things you hate being put in the middle of because it's really none of my business.
Right.
Even though, like for me being the son, you kind of feel like it is but you're in the middle, and it's a chaotic system, and so I think then you just try your best, to rebuild, and you try your best to work through, and I think it's very important to work through, as we were kind of sort of discussing at the start of this thing. I think it's important that you work through it. If you don't, it builds up and it festers up, and like you said, there's too many lumps under the rug. You can't keep sweeping the dirt, the garbage underneath there. You're going to eventually notice it, and so
I'm just going to say this, and if it's too much, then we'll stop. But it affected you mentally, to the point like it helped with your alcoholism.
yeah, it did.
You were in the middle a lot, and I don't know that you were meant to be in the middle. I don't think you were intentionally placed in the middle. I just think you were a common denominator, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it
in a way.
affected you.
It did.
I didn't know how to help you. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to handle it, and I was a new wife. I didn't know what to do as far as that goes.
Right.
So, like, what is something that you can tell the partner or whatever that's going through that, like, what would have been beneficial if I would have stepped in, because I didn't know what to do, so I just let you roll in it. I really...
There is some tricky ground because I think everybody's situation is unique. I don't think there are two scenarios that are the same.
Right.
Because we're people, we're individuals. And no matter what, it's going to have a different effect on me than it may on John.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's just, you don't ever know. And so each case, I think that's one thing first and foremost that we have to understand. There is no playbook. There's no rule book to this. Each situation is unique, and you have to just take it as it comes. If you're the spouse, my best advice would be, always let that person know that you're there. If they need to talk, if they need to just get it off their chest, let them know that the time it takes is fine. There's no rush. Be patient with it. As strange as it seems, there is no way to know when a situation will rise up. I know, for example, totally off key, but a prime example, times memories hit you differently about your father.
Yeah.
They come out of nowhere. We could be in Lubbock doing some shopping and a memory pops in your head because this triggered it, and you don't even, we're having a good time doing whatever, and here we are. And I think that same thing happens in any kind of instance that brings in any kind of traumatic scenarios, so to speak. Um, just be open minded to know that they are human, they're not perfect, that they can't help when something rises up in them. They can't help it. They didn't do it on purpose. They're not staying there. They're not dwelling in it. They're not wallowing in it. And just it's difficult. Not to mention any other case that may be coming up. Maybe they don't approve of how one parent reacted, or maybe they don't approve of how another parent um, is bashing, or whatever the case may be. You have to be open minded. Um, they need to know, to the best of my experience, that talking about it's okay. It has to be on the table, and we've always been like that. You have to be able to talk about the hard stuff. If the hard stuff is not able to be addressed, you can never be unified as a married couple, in my opinion, period. It is not a true, solid, foundational marriage if the hard stuff can't be addressed.
And I don't think we realized that until legal issues came up and we had to talk about hard stuff because there was no alternative. Like, we had to address, okay, if this happens and you're gone, like, what are we gonna, we had to talk about the hard stuff. And I think that's when that whole scenario changed in our marriage.
The concept did. We still struggle with it.
No, but talking about the hard stuff is not hard for me. It's the little nitpicky stuff that, like, I upset you because I didn't talk to you the right way. That's what gets me. Like, I can sit here and talk to you about the hard stuff.
I got you. I'm just saying we're not perfect. We still stumble into it every now and then. We don't. I wouldn't deem us experts. Is what I'm saying.
No,
like, we still have to stumble through it at times, and we still have to work through it at times. And then, if this is you, if this is something that you are going through, or if you're being the, I guess, the mediator, so to speak, for your spouse, like if they're going through it, and you're the one listening to this and looking for information to take to them, I want to get this off my chest. Forgiveness is key. In so many levels, both scripturally and emotionally. Forgiveness is the top thing that has to be on the table. The person needs to be able to forgive themselves. They need to be able to forgive the ones that were on the other side of the table doing, the affecting, I guess you would call it. You need to be able to forgive them. And it's not a quick process. Like, all right, you're forgiven. Like, I'm good. It's not a quick process. There's going to be stuff you have to work through. For me, it's taken a long time to truly understand the fullness of forgiveness. I still don't have it all figured out, and I've been working at this for quite some time. You think you do, and then something will stir up again, and you're right back in the same boat again, in a different way. And you still gonna have to back up and go through the motions and figure things out. So always, forgive who you need to, no matter what it is, no matter what's going on, work at that. And if you need to take one on at a time, then that's fine. Take one on at a time, like piece by piece, break it down. And it could take years, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think as long as you're working towards it, you're headed in the right direction.
And I think, too, it's important to note that you're going to have to forgive people that never apologized.
Yes, exactly.
Because in the midst of the battle, they either don't know they did wrong, or they're too prideful to apologize, whatever the case may be.
Right.
You're not going to get an apology for what you think you need an apology for. So you have to learn to forgive without that apology.
Yes.
And that's hard. But once you start doing that, once you start figuring out that you don't deserve an apology, or you're not going to get an apology, or you don't need an apology, it's easier to forgive because you're not waiting for that to happen. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen.
Well, you talk a lot about how do you call it? It's something about something over expectation. What do you?
Reality.
Yeah, reality over expectation. Like I would just figure, like, put money on the fact that you're probably not going to get an apology. If it happens, that's just a bonus. But I mean, I think you need to be in that state of forgiveness no matter what.
Yes.
Because, without forgiveness, there is no moving forward. You can't proceed in anything.
Right.
The Bible is huge on it, especially in the Gospels. Jesus is adamant about forgiveness, and he's always dealing with, being open-minded and open-hearted about how important it is about forgiving no matter what, no matter who. I mean, even when he's nailed to the cross, he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was all about compassion and forgiveness, and it's hard to do when you're the one being hurt. It's very hard to do when, here you got two people going through it, and here you are, a grown-up yourself, a parent, a husband, wife, whatever, yourself, and you're wounded, and that's what you focus on is how you're affected and how your kids and wife or husband are affected. But you still have to dig deep, and you still have to get past all of that and know that by you not forgiving, it's doing nothing but keeping you bound up.
Yeah.
Because you're not able to move on. You're not able to go live life because this is bothering you. This is hindering you. And no matter how bad you don't want it to, it really truly is. It's affecting you in ways that you never thought possible.
And from the spouse's point of view on that, I had a hard time forgiving because it was hurting you. I'm really one of those people, like, you can do whatever you want to me. I don't care. I really don't. Like, whatever. But when they hurt you or my kids, I'm like, I'm a real hard ass when it comes to that. Like, you don't mess with my kids or my TJ. Like, that's it. Like,
Right.
I'll cut you off faster than a pair of scissors. I don't need you at that point. And I had a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Because I got emotionally attached because you were hurting. And so that in turn made me mad and bitter. And I had to learn how to forgive because they didn't owe me an apology.
Right.
You know what I mean? They didn't even know it really affected me. They didn't owe me anything. I was mad because it had you upset. And you being upset shook the dynamics of this family because we turned to different things, or we would turn to alcohol or whatever. So I would be irate, not at you, but at the situation that was causing you to be that way.
No, I get that. I do.
So if you're the spouse or the partner in that, like, you have to forgive too without that apology because nobody owes you one. They didn't do anything intentionally. And nothing was ever done to you intentionally, I don't think.
No, I don't
either.
I
lived there. I was like, this is crap. But
I think all things run through your mind when you're in the midst of stuff. And so, I mean, all kinds of situations and scenarios enter your mind when you're in the midst of the battle. But I want to get into that a little deeper, but just for the sake of our podcast time, I'm going to take a break. And we're going to jump right back in here right quick with Raw and Real with TJ and Jen. I just didn't want to run out of time again because I feel like we have some more to get into.
This may be a long one.
And that's fine. This thing only let us do an hour at a time. So I just wanted to have time to do that. Hey, we are back with Raw and Real with TJ and Jen. And yeah, I mean, all kinds of things happen when you're in the midst of, or in the trenches. You see things differently than you do when you step outside or when you're operating from outside of the trenches. And, it's crucial to learn to forgive yourself. We were talking about forgiveness kind of right before that, and it's still part of that of the topic at the moment is you gotta learn to forgive yourself. I know there was times, and I don't think he'll mind me saying this. There was times where we butted heads, me and Dad did, over the divorce topic. We got into it, and we would meet up and have it out, and things weren't always the best for quite a while. And it's something we've had to continue to work at and get through because some of the things we said, I think, really hurt each other. And it really bothered us from the other perspective. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And it's taken a lot of recovery time and a lot of rebuild time in that aspect of things. But you have to learn to forgive yourself too for being that kind of person that you might have been in the midst of it. Which is why I think some divorces are very compatible, and some divorces are not. They're very traumatic. It still has never been able to recover, and they don't operate well outside of the realm of kids. Like, it's impossible. They're decent in front of the kids, but outside of that, it's just not. I know for a fact when I was probably in junior high, early high school, some other people that we knew, their kids were out of the house completely, marrying kind of the same scenario we're talking about here, and they got divorced. And it was not a pretty sight for a while. It wasn't something that was favored amongst the family. It caused a lot of family dynamics and problems and a lot of family issues. So, there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and people get mad at the other ones and things like that. And it's not always for the benefit or the best of anybody.
Yeah, very, very true. But at the end of the day, like, it's just between you two, or those two. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what your kids think or what your in-laws think or what the church thinks or what Sammy Joe down the street thinks. Like, there comes a time, at that time, it is just between you two and what is best for both of you.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that divorce is favored by both parties either, but one of them just cannot stay anymore, and they just can't make it work. And that's a whole different factor too. But this whole, like, we never interfered, I don't think. I know you and him. And you even had it out with your mom several times too. I mean,
yes.
You fought both grounds pretty evenly.
There was some indoctrination, I will say, that went along in those arguments, which is why I wanted to, I guess in a way, rebut some things that I had probably said in the past on the topic, because at that particular time we were new in God, and I probably went at him with the fact of he's messing up in the eyes of God, he's sinning. And so I'm basically in a way apologizing because as we've just got through reading, that's not accurate. You know what I mean? It's not, and I think a lot of that had to do with a lot of that, and it was just a very rough time. And the three of our lives, not to mention yours too, but I mean, between me, mom, and dad, like it was rough. It was not a good time in that family dynamic of what was going on.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It was just difficult.
I think most people think about divorce and like when their kids are little and how it affects them when they're little, and not having one or the other parent in the home, and nobody talks about the effects of when it happens after childhood.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it still affects you. Like, it has to. But that's all you've ever known.
Exactly.
So it has to affect you in some degree, and I don't think people talk about it enough. We've dealt with other people that, their parents have divorced later in life, and they all still have Christmas dinners together. They, like, nothing changed for them because they didn't want anything to change for their grandkids.
Right.
But they're both remarried. They're both doing their own thing, but they still all come together for their family Christmas. Like, they don't have to go here or go here or go here. They don't. And other families, that's just not the way it works out. I mean, that family's probably one in a lot.
No, I mean,
You just never know how that's going to play out.
again, every scenario is different. And it just is. And it just has to be able to be discussed. It has to be able to be talked about. It has to be able to be addressed. And if it's not, then you're going to see all kinds of repercussions that are going to stem from that, period. It's just not going to always be a good thing.
Yeah.
If it can't be talked about. I think it needs to be able to be on the table. It needs to be able to be discussed and addressed to keep things healthy for all parties.
Oh, absolutely.
But a lot of times people just aren't big at talking things through. They're not big at discussions. They're not big at working on looking at themselves in a mirror. It's not something that's easy to do. I wasn't a big fan of it. It's probably why it's taken me twice as long, to get to this point that I'm at now at 43, because I didn't like looking at the inward. Don't you dare bring in psychology or anything like that on me. It was a turnoff to me. But I didn't have any choice through some of my legal issues. I had to do a lot of counseling and different situations like that, and it made things different.
Yeah.
Where you look at things in a different perspective, and you learn there's different prerogatives to situations, and it helps. I mean, I hate to say it, but it does help. And it may not always be something that needs to be like where you go to a paid professional. It may be your spouse. It may just be a friend that you can
Absolutely.
dump everything on and know that they're not going to hold anything that you say accountable. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? They are, but they're not. It's not going to be held against you is what I'm trying to
Right.
say. So,
You need somebody that's going to help you grow and lift you up, and just sometimes you just need a deaf ear.
yeah.
You don't need advice. You don't need to be told how you feel is okay. You don't need that validation. You just need somebody to shut up and just listen. Just sit there and nod their head. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Sometimes you do need to be told you're acting like an idiot because you're mad, and it's up to you to discern when that time is.
Well, and two, something we have some time, so I wasn't going to address it if we didn't have time, but we have more time now. So another thing I wanted to touch base on is kind of some standards or some guidelines to it all, because I do believe that there are true issues, and then there are not true issues. Mm-hmm. In other words, being beat, being in a relationship where they're like an alcoholic addiction's a factor, I guess is a more rounded way to describe it, or being where they're either verbally or physically abusive, and I'm not trying to say these are the parameters, but I'm just trying to help people out that are maybe questioning. They may have questions like, what is a good line to draw that if it gets crossed, I can't do it anymore, like you had to. And maybe you're a better one to get into this than I am, but and then there's also issues where I don't feel like the way things are seeming to me, personal opinion, not statistics or any kind of backing on it, but it seems to me that in this day and age, marriage and divorce is so much more common, because I don't think we do enough deep diving into a person to truly know who they are. And when certain aspects of that person are gone that we used to find attractive or appealing or binding, when they're gone, there's no glue to hold a relationship together.
I think people think divorce is easy.
Okay.
I think I can go on, I can start my new life, I don't have to deal with this crap. I think they think it's easy.
Okay.
When in the reality, you have to choose your hard. Marriage is hard. Divorce is hard. And it all boils down to you choosing your hard. Because it's not just, we're divorced, I got me an apartment, I get to do whatever crap I want to anymore.
Right.
And I think I think it was glorified in that aspect. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have to listen to him anymore, or I don't have to listen to her, and I can leave the toilet seat up, and I can have parties again like I did in high school. You know what I mean?
Right.
My college years, and that's not it. It may last for a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. You may make that last for a little bit, but at the end of the day, like, you're gonna have to deal with the hardness of divorce.
Well, and that's kind of too exactly what I'm getting at is, there are, to me, set parameters that justify a separation. When you're in harm, when your kids are in harm, yes. When, like you were saying, when things just get hard or difficult, like we're actually having to work at something, we're having to take the time to invest into it, this is too much trouble, I'm out. That to me is not a legitimate reason.
Right.
It proves to me that you did not really truly love that person.
Right.
Like, truly love that person. Because I know from my explanation, my prerogative of things would be like, no matter what you do, period, I'm going to give it everything that I have. And I don't think that's the case in a lot of relationships. The very sign of any kind of hardship, they bail. So to me, they weren't truly in love with that person.
Right.
There was something that they enjoyed about that person. There was something that attracted them to that person, but they weren't in love. When you see somebody that's been together for 50, 60 years, folks, that's love, because you don't get to spend half your life with somebody and not love them. Like, there's too much at stake. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, it's imperative to me, and I will not stop preaching from this pedestal for as long as God's given me air. It's the difference between being spiritually bound to somebody and the importance of being spiritually bound and just being bound by flesh or, desires of the flesh, because it's the battle that's gone on for the test of time. Even Paul gets on in the same chapter. You ever heard the devil made me do it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where it comes from. This is the biblical aspect in which it was rooted.
Okay.
And it starts in 7:14. It says, we know that the law is spiritual, but I am a creature of the flesh, the worldly, the self-reliant, that I am carnal and unspiritual, talking about our flesh. It is the carnal man, right? Sold unto slavery to sin and and serving under its control. For I do not understand my own actions. I am baffled and bewildered by them. I do not practice what I want to do, but I am doing the practice what I want of everything I hate, and yielding to my human nature, my worldliness, my sin, my captivity. It goes on and on and on, but basically that's where that comes from. The things that I want to do, I don't do, and the things I don't want to do, I do. Is basically what he's saying. Like, the devil made me do it. And he said, as the spirit person seeks, the spirit-filled believer seeks to do good.
Yes.
But our flesh seeks the things of the flesh, the evil things, which is exactly what he was talking about later on when he wrote to the church in Corinth in chapter 10. We've been over this many times. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They're not manly. So we're always going to be battling with that good versus evil.
Right.
And he goes on to say in verse 25 and 24 and 25, he says, without God, we will be and are miserable people. We're full of wicked and immoral thoughts. But, he's praising God at the end of this letter, because he's like, praise God for the deliverance through Jesus that brought that new covenant into path where we can have that spirit man on the inside of us. And I know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, had we not had the godly spiritual wisdom that we sought after, that was required from us when we got married, I don't think we'd ever have made it as far as we did. We wouldn't have had any backbone, so to speak.
Oh no.
You know, Monty was imperative that we be trained up in God as much as possible before he would even do the ceremony. He wasn't going to do it otherwise. And so, I mean, I think that's missing from our culture. Was I telling y'all the other day that I did a deal researching for a book I'm writing, and that the numbers are down. In 2019, they were at, what did I tell you, 34% of people in America went to church.
Yeah.
And now it's, in 2021, they calculated that 28% go to church. Like, God is not a factor in relationships. Not to the degree that he needs to be.
No.
And I think that's exactly why we see in divorce rates of 50% or higher in this country.
Yeah. Well, we were taught to, like, we weren't allowed to bring that up into a fight. You know, we weren't allowed to threaten it.
Oh, wow. I had forgot. Yeah.
And we've lived by that principle from day one. I mean, anytime we have fought, and y'all, like, we could fight. Like, WWE had nothing on us, too.
That is true. That is true.
But we never crossed that line, even when we were living in our fleshly days. Like, we didn't, that was never on the table.
We've never threatened each other with divorce, no.
No.
Monty was, I forgot about that. He was imperative on that. Like, you never, ever, ever throw up divorce, period, no matter how bad it gets.
Yeah,
We've never done it.
So, if it comes up, you know it's pretty well serious.
I think it's come borderline. Like, I know the question has arose at times in the heat of the moment. Like, if that's how you feel, then why are you still here? Mm-hmm. Or if you hate it that bad, why are you still here? But we've never used the word or threatened the word divorce. Like, it's just never come up.
And the answer is probably because I'm nuts and I love you, and that's just my curse in life.
Which would probably stop the argument in its tracks.
It's come up a few times.
But no, for real. I mean, going through a divorce as an adult, and I'm talking about if you're an adult and your parents divorce. Yeah, you're the child of the matter. Like, it's a very discreet topic. I've seen different variables. I really have. I've seen sons apologize to mothers for the way their fathers did them. That's what felt right, I guess. I've seen kids that totally wigged out on both of them. We've seen that scenario play out. Yeah. Which, like I said, different circumstances. There were different circumstances behind those actions.
And you can't predict how that's going to make you feel. You can't predict how you're going to react in that situation.
No, you can't.
And just like you said earlier, you're not going to be able to tell when those emotions are going to come up and they're going to hit you.
No.
And basically slap you in the face either. You just never know how you're going to react to a situation until you're put in that situation.
Right. You don't. And my best advice is always know where there's somebody you can talk to. Maybe it is a religious leader, and I hate to use that word religious, but because I don't believe in all that. But I mean, maybe it is a pastor. Maybe it is a friend in the ministry that you know. Maybe it's a friend from high school that y'all stayed in touch with. Spouse. I hope your spouse can always be your rock. They need to be at least the first person, in my opinion, that you turn to. It just makes for a stronger relationship. But I don't know the ins and outs of every relationship. So, I mean, there needs to be some way to talk about it, no matter who it is or what it is. And there needs to be steps to forgiveness, whether you write them out or whether somebody writes them out for you that has some better insight. Because I know I wouldn't have had some of the knowledge had I not been through some classes of some degree and learned some different ways to process.
Right.
I still use them to this day in different areas that weren't even tied into that. But they come up and I'm like, wow, I guess I really was paying attention.
Yeah.
They need to be there. You need to be able to forgive and work through the steps, and I think that's why AA talks about it the way that they do. Forgiveness and having people forgive you, because it is a major step, no matter what, and no matter what your belief system is, it is a healthy process, and forgiveness is a humongous key in unlocking all these doors, because any door that's closed, in my opinion, you're asking for trouble. You need to be able to work through it. You need to be able to talk through it, and somehow, some way, it's gonna have to be addressed.
Yeah. And just know that what you feel is not wrong. If you're mad, you're not wrong. If you're sad, you're not wrong. If you're happy because you've watched them fight your whole life and you're like, okay, finally.
Right.
Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes it's a relief when they're no longer together because they're toxic together. But whenever your feeling's not wrong, and you need to talk to somebody that verifies that knows that your feelings are not wrong. Whatever you're feeling in that moment, it's not wrong.
For sure.
And two, I think it's imperative to say it's okay to step back from the parents if they're causing turmoil in your life, if they're causing you to fall off track, if they're causing you to, if they're causing havoc in your family, your immediate family, your kids. I think it's imperative to know that it's okay to step back.
Their separation should not cause your marriage
yes.
problems. Yeah, I'm in agreement with
it's
that.
Okay to step back and just be like, when y'all have handled this, or when I feel like I'm stronger and I can come back into this with a clear head, I'll come back. But right now, I need to back away.
Or when my family's in jeopardy. I mean, I can see that happening. I can see, a parental separation causing stress on a son's or a daughter's marriage, where they're kind of, I can't believe your dad did that. And you don't talk about my dad that way or whatever. I can see that happening. Or mom, it could happen.
Yeah.
For sure, when opinions go to flying, yeah.
At the end of the day, that's still your parents.
It is, and that's another thing I think concerning us. We've never really done. It's never been an attack point at any argument. It's never been a tool used to prove a point.
I hope not.
No, it's that's thin water. You just don't bring their parents, their family into it.
No, that's not fair because you're not them.
Well, they can't control what they do.
No.
You can't help what your mom and dad did.
Right.
They're grown-ups. They're doing things on their own.
That's right. So yeah, just know that it's okay to step back from that if you need to. Sometimes that's the eye-opener to realize that people are being ignorant in a sense,
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And that kind of puts the ball in their court, like they have to choose. If I act like this, I'm not going to be around these people.
Right.
And they kind of have to choose their priorities, And if you and your family are a priority, then they will make every effort to be a part of your family without their drama and chaos.
Absolutely. Wow. Anything else?
So you?
No, I think we hit it all. I mean, in any scenario, I think anybody should do their full out, wholehearted best to save a relationship. I mean, any kind of time invested is imperative, no matter if it's a few years or double digits. I mean, it's imperative. And try everything that you can try, in my opinion. And even if that means you're intervening in your parents' relationships, as weird and odd as that may seem, try to get them to figure it out. And if you know that they just can't, then, man, I'm praying for you, because it's never an easy situation to hear, and it's never an easy situation to see, and it's never an easy situation to be a part of, and you're going to be a part of it. And it's crucial that you have people in your corner that can help you in any shape, form, or fashion that they can. And don't turn away help, big or small. It will help you more than you realize. It may not seem like much right now, but even in the best situations where, like, hypothetically, your mom and your dad, they just can't make it. They cannot, but they still are remaining friends or social or whatever the case may be. It's still going to be difficult for you, because that's your childhood unfolding. That's your basis of everything you thought was solid, and now all of a sudden it's not. It's going to disrupt you more than you think.
And that's your parent hurting.
That's
it's
another
no different
point.
Than them laying on their.
I thought you said you didn't have nothing.
You kept going. I didn't. It's your fault.
That's your.
I mean, it's kind of like a cancer diagnosis. That's your parent laying in the bed.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Your parent is hurting. They're crying out. They are struggling, and nobody wants to see their parents struggle with anything.
That's true.
I mean.
That is true.
It's a struggle, and your heart hurts for that, and it affects you. It has to. I mean, I don't know how it could.
No, that's spot on. That's a good point we didn't even get into, but yeah. Huh?
Never know.
But dig it out. I mean, search God out and look for Him for guidance and stuff, because there is not a situation on this planet that He hasn't already seen or been into. And I've seen people that don't even know God go through dramatic, life-altering situations that help them find God. And I'm not saying that's why He allowed it to happen, but God will do His very hardest to get you to see the glory and the light that He possesses. And sometimes it does come through these difficult situations in our lives. And man, if you need help and we can help, reach out to us. We're here. Like I said, there's not much probably in marriage-related issues that we haven't been through. I'm not saying we're an expert, but we will give you our 2 cents, and that and a couple of dollars will buy you coffee at Starbucks. But I mean,
or more than a couple of dollars. And 2, I just want to add, since I didn't have anything else to say,
here we go,
is give grace.
Yeah.
Because everybody's hurting, and I think that's where I missed it a lot. I'd be like, can we not move on?
Yeah.
Something else would happen, something else would be said, and I'd be like, okay. So just give people grace, because they're all hurting in their different times, and they're all processing it differently. So just be sure you're extending that grace as much as you possibly can.
That's good. So. And as always, if you need us, please reach out to us, quinttministries@gmail.com. You can get to any kind of comments or whatever through our website now. There's a portion at the bottom that you can put in your information, and we'll get it in form. Private message us on all social media groups. It's under Quint T Ministries. And let me see what else. Oh, our blogs and podcasts are now available through our website, through the dashboard, manual, whatever you want to call it. I'm not good at this. The homepage, there's a deal. You can click on it and go to podcasts and click on the Raw and Real, and it'll take you to all our podcasts that's available now. We're working on YouTube to get it through there too. I don't know what all it's going to take, but we're working on that. And 2, if you need any material, any kind of material that you're in search of, we're working on getting some more material in here to the office. So Bibles, any kind of pamphlet, handout, whatever you want to call them, If you need some more information, reach out to us. We'll get it to you.
Yes.
So until next time,
Yep.
just keep it raw and real. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.